The knife stopped an inch from the man's throat. Kim Jae-sung, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul's underground, never hesitated. He had ordered executions before breakfast, eliminated rivals without blinking, and built an empire on the bodies of men who underestimated him. His hands never shook. His resolve never wavered. Until now. Through the two-way mirror of the interrogation room, he watched his new housekeeper arranging flowers in the penthouse above. Nothing unusual. Just a woman in a simple black uniform, her movements efficient and quiet. Except for one thing. The bracelet on her wrist. Not gold. Not jade. Just a twisted piece of red string with 7 knots, each one tied in a pattern that only 2 people in the world would recognize. A bracelet he had woven with bleeding fingers 15 years ago in the darkness of a shipping container, promising a terrified girl that they would survive together. A bracelet he thought had been buried with her body in an unmarked grave. The man tied to the chair was still begging for his life, but Jae-sung couldn't hear him anymore. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he stared at the impossible woman on the screen, wearing the impossible bracelet, alive when she should be dead. His hand dropped. The knife clattered to the floor. "Get out," he whispered to his lieutenant. "Boss," this man betrayed. "Get out." The room emptied in seconds. Jae-sung pressed his palms against the glass, his breath fogging the surface, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Amara was alive. And she was in his home. "Stop right here for 10 seconds. Jae-sung just saw the impossible, a bracelet he made 15 years ago for a girl he thought was dead. Do you have someone like that? A promise you broke? A person you lost? A version of yourself you buried? This story is for people carrying those burdens. Subscribe right now if you want to see whether redemption is real, whether broken people can find their way back, whether it's ever too late to become who you promised to be. Hit subscribe. Comment what you're feeling in one word. Let's continue this together. Seoul's elite whispered his name with a mixture of fear and respect. Kim Jae-sung, the Dragon of Gangnam. On paper, he was a legitimate businessman, luxury hotels, import-export companies, real estate developments. In reality, he controlled everything the law couldn't touch: weapons, information, protection, and power. His penthouse sat atop the tallest building in the district, a fortress of black marble and bulletproof glass. 30 floors below, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, unaware of the shadow that ruled over it. Jae-sung was 31 years old and had already killed 23 men. He remembered every face, every name, every reason. Some deserved it. Some didn't. It didn't matter anymore. He had stopped feeling guilty around victim number 7. But he couldn't sleep. The insomnia had started 5 years ago, around the time his empire became untouchable. Every night, he would lie in his custom-made bed worth more than most people's homes, staring at the ceiling, counting the hours until dawn. His doctor prescribed pills that didn't work. His mistresses provided distractions that lasted only minutes. Nothing worked. 2 weeks ago, his head of security had made a mistake. A photographer from a tabloid magazine had managed to capture images of Jae-sung meeting with a prominent politician. The photos never made it to print. Jae-sung had acquired the magazine and burned it to the ground, metaphorically and literally. But the breach was unacceptable. He eliminated his entire household staff. Drivers, cooks, cleaners, security, everyone except his core lieutenants. Loyalty was everything in his world, and he couldn't afford another leak. "I need someone invisible," he told Park Min-ho, his oldest friend and second in command. "Someone who doesn't know who I am, doesn't care who I am, and won't live long enough to become a problem if they talk." Min-ho had returned with a file 3 days later. Her name is Amara Johnson. American, 30 years old, living in Seoul for 8 years. Works for high-profile families. Speaks basic Korean. No family, no connections, no social media presence. She's a ghost. Jae-sung had barely glanced at the photo, A black woman with kind eyes and a forgettable face. Hire her. Standard surveillance. If she looks at anything twice, eliminate her. Amara had arrived on a Monday morning with a single bag and a quiet demeanor that suggested she had spent her life learning to be invisible. She didn't ask questions. She didn't make eye contact. She simply began working, moving through his penthouse like smoke, there and gone before he could fully register her presence. For the first week, Jae-sung monitored her obsessively through the security cameras. She cleaned. She cooked simple meals. She watered plants he didn't remember owning. She never touched his personal spaces, never lingered in rooms longer than necessary, never showed any curiosity about the locked doors or the late-night visitors who came and went through the private elevator. Perfect. Then something changed. The air in his penthouse felt different. Lighter somehow. The harsh edges of his minimalist design seemed softer. He noticed small things. Fresh flowers in the hallway, the curtains opened just enough to let in morning light without exposing him to sniper angles, the faint scent of lavender in his bedroom. And for the first time in 5 years, Kim Jae-sung slept. Not just an hour or two. He slept through the entire night, sinking into darkness, so deep he didn't dream. He woke up disoriented, almost afraid, his body unfamiliar with the sensation of rest. It happened again the next night. And the next. By the second week, Jae-sung realized he was dependent on whatever magic this woman had brought into his home. He told himself it was the routine, the cleanliness, the order she had imposed on his chaos. But deep down, he knew it was her. He began finding excuses to be in the penthouse when she was working. He would sit in his office with the door open, pretending to review documents while watching her dust the bookshelves in the next room. She never acknowledged his presence, never spoke unless spoken to, never gave any indication that she knew he was observing her. Until the day he saw the bracelet. It was a Thursday afternoon, and Jae-sung was supposed to be at a meeting with his weapons supplier. Instead, he was watching the security feed from his bedroom, observing Amara as she changed his sheets. Her sleeves were rolled up against the warmth of the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. That was when he saw it, a red string bracelet on her left wrist, 7 knots tied in an intricate pattern. The world stopped. Jae-sung stood up, so violently his chair crashed backward. His hands trembled as he rewound the footage, zoomed in, studied every detail of those 7 knots. The first knot, the knot of survival. The second, the knot of hope. The third, the knot of silence. The fourth, the knot of protection. The fifth, the knot of promise. The sixth, the knot of remembrance. The seventh, the knot of return. He had tied those knots himself, 15 years ago, his fingers bleeding from the rough string, his voice hoarse from whispering prayers in the darkness. Flashback. 15 years ago. Jae-sung was 16 years old and had been living in hell for 3 months. The shipping container was 20 feet long and 8 feet wide. There were 43 children inside, ranging from 8 to 17 years old. They had been trafficked from various Asian countries, South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, all destined for factories, brothels, or organ harvesting operations in China. Jae-sung had been snatched from an orphanage in Busan. He was tall for his age, strong, useful. The traffickers had promised him a job in a factory with good pay. Instead, they had drugged him and thrown him into the container with the others. The conditions were inhuman. No light.
No ventilation.
A bucket in the corner for waste. Food shoved through a slot once a day, rice mixed with something that might have been vegetables or might have been garbage. Children died regularly. When someone stopped breathing, the guards would drag the body out and replace it with a new victim. Jae-sung survived by becoming ruthless. He took food from weaker children. He slept near the air vents, pushing smaller kids aside. He learned to shut off his emotions, to see the others not as people, but as obstacles to his own survival. Then they brought in Amara. She was 15, the only black girl in a container full of Asian children. She had been living in Seoul with her missionary parents when they died in a car accident. With no family and no documentation, she had fallen through the cracks of the system, ending up in the same orphanage that Jae-sung had been taken from. The other children turned on her immediately. Different was dangerous. Different attracted attention. They refused to share food with her, pushed her away from the air vents, whispered that she would bring bad luck to them all. Jae-sung watched her starve for 3 days. On the 4th day, she stopped moving. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He told himself that survival required selfishness. He told himself her death would mean one less person competing for resources. But that night, when the guards shoved the daily ration through the slot, Jae-sung took half of his rice and placed it in front of Amara's still form. "Eat," he said in broken English. She looked up at him with eyes that had already accepted death. Then she looked at the rice. Then back at him. "Why?" she whispered. Jae-sung didn't have an answer. So, he just sat beside her until she ate. From that moment on, he protected her. When the older boys tried to hurt her, Jae-sung fought them, taking beatings that left him unable to stand. When the guards came looking for entertainment, Jae-sung hid her behind his own body. When food was scarce, he gave her his portion and pretended he wasn't hungry. She did the same for him. When he was sick with fever, she tore strips from her own clothing to cool his burning skin. When he was beaten unconscious by the guards, she dragged him to the air vent and kept him breathing. When he whispered that he wanted to die, she whispered back that they would survive together. They were in that container for 6 months. In the darkness, they created their own world. Amara taught him better English. Jae-sung taught her Korean curse words that made her laugh despite everything. They made up stories about their future, where they would go, what they would do, who they would become. One night, Jae-sung found a piece of red string tangled in the corner of the container. It was rough and dirty, probably fallen from some shipment that had previously occupied the space. He spent hours in the darkness, his fingers bleeding, tying 7 knots in a specific pattern that his grandmother had taught him before she died. "In Korea," he told Amara as he tied the bracelet around her wrist, "we believe in the red string of fate. It connects people who are destined to meet. No matter how far apart, no matter how much time passes, the string will always bring them back together." She touched the knots carefully. "What do they mean?" "Each one is a promise. We will survive this. We will hope. We will stay silent when we need to. We will protect each other. We will remember each other. And one day, we will return to each other as free people." Amara looked at him in the darkness, her eyes shining with tears. "You promise?" "I promise. And when we're free, when I'm rich and powerful enough that no one can ever hurt us again." He took her hand. "I'll marry you. We'll never be alone again." She smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her in months. "That's the 7th knot, isn't it? The return." "Yes. No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, we'll find each other again." 2 weeks later, the container was raided. Chinese police had received a tip about the trafficking operation. They stormed the facility, freeing the surviving children and arresting the guards. It should have been a rescue. It should have been salvation. Instead, it was chaos. The traffickers set fire to the warehouse to destroy evidence. The container doors jammed. Smoke filled the air. Children screamed and trampled each other trying to escape. Jae-sung was holding Amara's hand when the wall of fire separated them. "Jae-sung," she screamed, her voice cutting through the roar of flames. "Amara." He tried to reach her, but the crowd pushed him backward, toward the exit, away from the fire. "The 7th knot," she screamed. "Remember the 7th knot." Those were the last words he heard before strong hands dragged him out of the burning warehouse. He fought like a demon, trying to go back in, but the police held him down. He watched the building collapse, watched the flames consume everything, watched his world end. They told him later that 32 children had died in the fire. Amara Johnson was one of them. They had found her body in the rubble, identified her through dental records provided by her deceased parents' mission organization. Jae-sung was sent back to the orphanage in Busan. He didn't speak for 6 months. When he finally opened his mouth again, it was to curse, to fight, to destroy anything and everything that reminded him of kindness. He ran away from the orphanage at 17, fell in with a gang, and discovered that the ruthlessness he had learned in the container was exactly what the criminal underworld valued. He climbed the ranks quickly, leaving bodies in his wake, until he owned the gang that had once owned him. By 25, he was the Dragon of Gangnam. By 30, he had buried his guilt under an empire of blood and money. And now, at 31, he was staring at security footage of a dead girl wearing a bracelet he had woven for her ghost. Jae-sung didn't confront Amara immediately. 15 years of surviving in the underworld had taught him patience, strategy, and the value of information. If she was truly Amara, if she had somehow survived the fire that killed 32 children, then she knew who he was. She had to. The woman who taught him English in a shipping container would recognize the man who became a mafia boss. Unless she had forgotten. Unless the trauma had erased her memories. Unless she was playing her own game. He needed to know which. So he began testing her, the same way a predator tests prey before striking. Jae-sung ordered Minho to purchase dozens of red string bracelets from various markets in Seoul. He scattered them throughout the penthouse, on the coffee table, on the kitchen counter, hanging from door handles. He watched through the cameras as Amara encountered each one. She would pause every single time. Her hand would reach out, her fingers would hover over the red string, and for exactly 5 seconds, she would stop breathing. Then she would carefully move the bracelet aside and continue working, her face neutral, her movements controlled. But those 5 seconds told Jae-sung everything. She remembered. In the shipping container, Amara used to hum a gospel song her mother had taught her. She never sang the words. That would have attracted the guards' attention, but the melody had been their lullaby in the darkness. His eye is on the sparrow. Jae-sung added it to his morning playlist, letting it echo through the penthouse while he pretended to work in his office. Amara was dusting the hallway when the song began. She dropped the cloth. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling whatever sound threatened to escape. Her whole body trembled as she stood frozen in the middle of the hallway, tears streaming down her face. Jae-sung watched her fight for composure, watched her wipe her eyes, watched her pick up the cloth with shaking hands and continue working as if nothing had happened. But for those 30 seconds, she had been 15 years old again, trapped in darkness, clinging to hope through a song. This was the cruelest test, and Jae-sung hated himself for designing it. He staged a small accident in the kitchen, an unmistakable electrical fire, quickly contained by the penthouse's advanced suppression system. No real danger, but enough smoke to trigger anyone with trauma. Amara was in the next room when it happened. The smoke alarm wailed. Automated sprinklers activated, and Amara completely fell apart. She collapsed on the floor, hyperventilating, her hands clawing at her throat as if she couldn't breathe. She was screaming words in English that Jae-sung couldn't make out through the speakers, her body convulsing with terror. Jae-sung ran. He didn't think. He didn't strategize. He abandoned the security room and sprinted to the penthouse, taking the stairs 3 at a time because the elevator was too slow. When he burst into the living room, Amara was curled in a ball on the floor, sobbing, still screaming about fire and containers and death. He knelt beside her and did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed her hand and pressed it against his chest, right over his racing heart. 7 knots, he whispered in Korean. Survival. Hope. Silence. Protection. Promise. Remembrance. Return. Amara's eyes snapped open. She stared at him, her breath still ragged, her body still shaking. For a moment, neither of them moved. The smoke was clearing. The sprinklers had stopped. The world was quiet except for their breathing. Jae-sung, she whispered in English, her voice broken. He nodded, his throat too tight to speak. You're alive, she said, fresh tears spilling down her face. So are you, he managed. And then she slapped him. The crack echoed through the penthouse. Jae-sung's head snapped to the side, his cheek burning. He looked back at her, stunned. 15 years, Amara said, her voice shaking with rage and grief. 15 years, and you never looked for me? You became this. She gestured at the luxury surrounding them. This monster everyone whispers about, and you never thought to search for the girl you promised to marry? Jae-sung felt something break inside him. They told me you were dead. They showed me a body. And you believed them. Amara stood up, backing away from him. The boy I knew in that container would have burned the world down to make sure I was really gone. But you? You just accepted it and moved on. I didn't move on. Jae-sung shouted, standing to face her. I built this entire empire because I failed to protect you. Every person I've killed, every crime I've committed, it's all because I couldn't save you. I didn't need you to avenge me, Jae-sung. Amara's voice cracked. I needed you to find me. The silence that followed was suffocating. How? Jae-sung asked quietly. How did you survive? Amara looked away, her hand unconsciously touching the red string bracelet. A firefighter found me in the rubble. I was unconscious, barely breathing. They airlifted me to a hospital in Shanghai. I was in a coma for 3 weeks. Then how did they identify a body? Another girl. Same age, same build. The fire had burned her beyond recognition, and in the chaos, they assumed it was me. By the time I woke up and could tell them who I was, I'd already been declared dead. My parents were gone. No other family. I was just erased from existence. Jae-sung felt sick. You've been alive this whole time. I spent 5 years in various facilities in China and Southeast Asia. Finally made it back to Seoul when I was 20. I've been here ever since, working, surviving, trying to forget the boy who promised to return for me and never did. Then why are you here? Why did you take this job? Why are you wearing that bracelet if you hate me so much? Amara met his eyes, and he saw something there that terrified him more than any enemy he'd ever faced. Because I needed to know if the boy I loved was completely dead, or if there was anything left of him inside the Dragon of Gangnam. Amara didn't quit. Jae-sung didn't fire her. Instead, they entered a strange, tense coexistence that neither of them knew how to name. She continued working in his penthouse, maintaining her invisible presence. But now, everything was different. The air crackled with unspoken words every time they were in the same room. Jae-sung found himself inventing reasons to be home. Morning meetings were rescheduled. Late-night interrogations were delegated to Minho. The Dragon of Gangnam, who once ruled his empire with an iron fist, was now rushing home like a lovesick teenager. He would sit in his office, pretending to work, while actually watching Amara move through the penthouse. She knew he was watching. Sometimes she would pause in her work and look directly at the hidden cameras, her expression unreadable. One evening, Jae-sung came home to find his dining table set for 2. Amara stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing a simple dress instead of her uniform. You haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days, she said. Seat. It wasn't a request. Jae-sung sat. She brought out dishes he hadn't tasted in 15 years. Simple rice, kimchi jjigae made the way the orphanage used to make it, and pan-fried mackerel. Nothing fancy. Nothing expensive. Just food that tasted like memory. They ate in silence for 10 minutes. Do you remember what you told me? Amara finally asked. In the container, when I said I wanted to die? Jae-sung set down his chopsticks. I told you that dying was easy. Surviving was the real revenge. And do you think you've survived, Jae-sung? Or did you just find a different way to die? He had no answer. Amara stood up, began clearing the dishes. The boy I knew wanted to be strong enough to protect people. The man you've become just hurts them first before they can hurt you. That boy was weak, Jae-sung said quietly. That boy watched you burn and couldn't do anything about it. That boy gave me half his rice when he was starving, Amara countered. That boy took beatings to keep me safe. That boy was the strongest person I've ever known. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Jae-sung alone with 15 years of choices he couldn't unmake. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Amara began leaving small traces of herself throughout the penthouse. A book on the coffee table, a sweater draped over the back of a chair, her shoes by the door instead of hidden in the staff quarters. She was marking territory, claiming space, refusing to remain invisible. Jae-sung responded in kind. He started leaving notes for her, simple things at first. Thank you for the meal. The flowers are nice. I slept well. Then the notes became more personal. Do you remember the story about the rabbit and the tiger? I still can't sing, but I downloaded that song. I'm sorry I forgot to look for you. Amara never responded to the notes directly, but she would leave her own in reply. The rabbit one because he was clever, not strong. Your Korean has gotten better. I'm sorry I expected you to be who you were at 16. They were rebuilding themselves piece by piece, note by note. But the underworld doesn't respect healing. And the past doesn't let go without a fight. Park Min-ho had been Jae-sung's right hand for 10 years. He was smart, ruthless, and loyal, or so Jae-sung had always believed. But Min-ho had noticed the changes in his boss. The distraction, the softness, the dangerous attachment to a housekeeper who seemed to hold some inexplicable power over the dragon of Gangnam. You're compromised, Min-ho said one evening, cornering Jae-sung in his office. The men are talking. They see you rushing home. They see you smiling. They see weakness.
I've
been careful for 10 years, Min-ho shot back. I've watched you build this empire through blood and fear. And now I'm watching you tear it down for some woman who showed up out of nowhere. She's not some woman. She's a liability. Min-ho slammed his hand on the desk. Do you know how many enemies would pay millions to get their hands on someone you care about? Do you know what they would do to her? Jae-sung stood up slowly, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. If anyone touches her, I will personally destroy everyone they've ever loved before killing them. Are we clear? Min-ho stared at him. You've gone soft.
No.
I've remembered what I'm actually fighting for. But Min-ho's warning stuck in Jae-sung's mind like a splinter. He increased security around the penthouse. He had Amara's movements monitored whenever she left the building. He made it clear to his entire organization that she was under his protection. He was so focused on external threats that he didn't see the internal one until it was too late. The annual Underworld Summit was Seoul's worst-kept secret. Once a year, the city's most powerful criminals gathered under the pretense of a charity gala to negotiate territories, settle disputes, and display their power. Jae-sung had attended every year for the past decade. His presence was expected. His absence would signal weakness. This year, he planned to skip it. You can't, Min-ho insisted. Lee Dong-wook has been circling your territory for months. If you don't show up, he'll take it as a sign that you're losing control. Jae-sung knew Min-ho was right. The underworld respected strength above all else. Any sign of weakness would be exploited instantly. I'll go, he said finally. But I'm not staying long. Boss, Min-ho hesitated. The event requires you to bring a companion. Someone who displays your status. Jae-sung understood immediately. In the underworld, everything was performance. Bringing a beautiful woman was part of showing dominance, wealth, and power. He could hire an escort. He could bring one of the socialites who regularly threw themselves at him. Instead, he found himself standing outside Amara's door, knocking softly. She opened it, surprise flickering across her face.
Ji-sung?
Is something wrong? I need to attend an event tomorrow night, he said, the words coming out stiff and formal. I'd like you to come with me. Amara raised an eyebrow. As your housekeeper? As my guest. The silence stretched between them. These events. Jae-sung struggled to find the words. They're dangerous. Not physically, usually, but politically. Everyone there will try to find your weaknesses and exploit them. If you come with me, you'll become a target. Then why are you asking me? Jae-sung met her eyes. Because I'm tired of pretending you don't matter to me. Because I want to walk into a room full of monsters and show them that I found something worth protecting. Because, Amara prompted softly. Because I made you a promise 15 years ago, and I'd like to start keeping it. Amara touched the red string on her wrist. One condition. Anything. You introduce me as your equal, not your accessory. I'm not some trophy you're showing off. Jae-sung felt something warm spread through his chest.
Deal.
The gala was held in the Grand Hyatt, the entire top floor rented out for an evening of expensive suits, dangerous smiles, and deadly negotiations disguised as small talk. Jae-sung arrived in a black Mercedes, flanked by security. He wore a custom Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's yearly salary. His hair was perfectly styled. His expression was cold and controlled. The Dragon of Gangnam had arrived. But when Amara stepped out of the car beside him, the whispers started immediately. She wore a deep burgundy dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated.
No excessive jewelry.
No desperate attempts at glamour. Just quiet confidence and natural grace. And on her wrist, clearly visible, the red string bracelet. Jae-sung offered his arm. She took it. They walked into the lion's den together. The room went silent as they entered. Seoul's most powerful criminals stopped mid-conversation to stare at the Dragon of Gangnam and his mysterious companion. Lee Dong-wook, Jae-sung's primary rival, approached immediately. He was older, in his 50s, with the kind of cold eyes that came from decades of killing. Kim Jae-sung, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What an unexpected pleasure. And who is this lovely creature? This is Amara Johnson, Jae-sung said clearly. My partner. The word hung in the air like a detonation. Partner. Not date. Not companion. Partner. In the underworld, that word meant equal. It meant respect. It meant power. Lee's smile sharpened. How progressive of you. Though I must say, I don't recall seeing her at any of our previous gatherings. That's because I keep my most valuable assets protected, Jae-sung replied smoothly. Of course. Lee turned his attention to Amara, his gaze calculating. Tell me, Ms. Johnson, what does one do to become the partner of the Dragon of Gangnam? Amara met his eyes without flinching. Survive him when he was still human. The nearby conversations stopped completely. Lee laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fascinating. You must have quite a story. We all do, Amara said. The difference is, I'm not interested in using mine to intimidate people. Jae-sung felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Amara was holding her own, but she was also painting a target on her back. Lee's expression hardened. Enjoy the evening, he said coldly before walking away. The rest of the night was a careful dance. Jae-sung navigated conversations with various underworld figures, introducing Amara each time with the same deliberate respect. She handled herself beautifully, saying little but observing everything. But Jae-sung noticed something troubling. Park Min-ho was spending a lot of time talking to Lee Dong-wook's associates. The attack came during dinner. A woman in a glittering gold dress, one of Lee's known associates, approached the table where Jae-sung and Amara were seated. Amara Johnson, the woman said loudly, drawing attention. That's an interesting name for someone wearing such humble jewelry. She gestured at the red string bracelet with barely concealed contempt. In a room full of diamonds and gold, you wear children's craft projects. How quaint. Other guests were watching now, sensing blood in the water. Jae-sung started to stand, but Amara's hand on his arm stopped him. You're right, Amara said calmly. It is humble. It's made from cheap string and holds no monetary value whatsoever. The woman smirked, thinking she'd won. But this bracelet, Amara continued, her voice carrying across the now silent room, was made by a 16-year-old boy who had nothing but his own bleeding fingers and the desperate hope that the girl he loved would survive long enough to see freedom. It represents a promise made in the darkest place either of us has ever known. A promise that we would find each other again. She stood up, meeting the woman's eyes directly. So yes, compared to your diamonds bought with blood money and worn to impress people you actually despise, my bracelet is humble. But it's also real. Can you say the same about anything you're wearing? The silence was deafening. The woman's face flushed with rage. How dare you? Leave, Jae-sung said quietly. The single word cut through the air like a blade. The woman looked at him, at his expression, and whatever she saw there made her step back. Lee won't forget this insult, she hissed. Good, Jae-sung replied. Tell him that anyone who insults Amara Johnson has insulted me. And we all know what happens to people who insult the dragon of Gangnam. The woman fled. The room slowly resumed conversation, but the damage was done. Lines had been drawn. Sides had been chosen. Jae-sung had just declared war over a piece of red string. And he would do it again in a heartbeat. They were walking to the car when the ambush happened. 4 men with guns emerged from the shadows of the parking garage. Professional. Organized. Definitely not random attackers. Jae-sung pushed Amara behind him, his hand already reaching for the weapon hidden under his jacket. Don't move, boss, a familiar voice said. Park Min-ho stepped out of the shadows, a gun in his hand pointed directly at Jae-sung's chest.
Min-ho?
Jae-sung's voice was deadly calm. What is this? This is me saving what you built before you destroy it completely, Min-ho replied. His eyes flicked to Amara. Lee Dong-wook offered me partnership. Equal territory, equal profit. All I have to do is deliver the dragon of Gangnam's greatest weakness. You're making a mistake, Jae-sung said. No, you made the mistake. You got soft. You fell in love. Min-ho spat the word like a curse. In our world, love is suicide. Then shoot me, Jae-sung said. But let her go. She's worth nothing to Lee. She's worth everything to you. That makes her worth millions. Min-ho gestured to his men. Take the girl. Everything happened in 3 seconds. The men moved toward Amara. Jae-sung drew his weapon and shot the closest attacker in the knee. Min-ho fired, the bullet grazing Jae-sung's shoulder. And Amara did something that shocked everyone. She ran directly at Min-ho. Not away.
Toward.
She grabbed his gun hand and twisted with a technique that spoke of training Jae-sung didn't know she had. The weapon discharged into the air. Min-ho stumbled backward, and Amara swept his legs out from under him. Jae-sung used the distraction to take down the other 2 attackers with brutal efficiency. Years of street fighting and survival instincts took over. Within seconds, all 4 men were on the ground. Min-ho was trying to crawl toward his dropped weapon when Jae-sung's foot came down on his hand. Wait, Amara said softly. Jae-sung looked at her, his finger already tightening on the trigger. Don't kill him because of me, she said. Don't add another body to the count in my name. He tried to kidnap you. And he failed. Because we protected each other. Amara met Jae-sung's eyes. The boy in the container would have shown mercy. Be that boy, not the dragon. Jae-sung stared at Min-ho, rage and betrayal warring with the person he was trying to become. Finally, he lowered the gun. You have 24 hours to leave Seoul, he said to Min-ho. If I ever see you again, Amara's mercy won't save you. Min-ho scrambled to his feet and ran. Jae-sung immediately turned to Amara, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Did they touch you?
Ay fine.
She was shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. Where did you learn to fight like that? Survival training, she said quietly. After I escaped the facilities in China, I promised myself I'd never be helpless again. Jae-sung pulled her into his arms, not caring who might see, not caring about the bodies around them. I almost lost you again. Amara held onto him just as tightly. But you didn't. Security around the penthouse tripled overnight. Jae-sung called in every favor, activated every asset, and made it clear that anyone who threatened Amara would face the full wrath of his organization. Lee Dong-wook sent a formal apology the next morning, claiming Minho had acted without authorization. It was a lie, and everyone knew it, but it was also a strategic retreat. Lee wasn't ready for all-out war. Not yet. Amara found Jae-sung on the penthouse balcony at 3 a.m, staring out at the city lights. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "I keep thinking about what Minho said. That love is suicide in our world." Amara stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Is he wrong?" Jae-sung turned to face her. "I don't care if he's right. I spent 15 years being the dragon of Gangnam, and it gave me everything except a reason to wake up in the morning. Then you walked through my door wearing a bracelet I thought was buried in ashes, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to be human." Jae-sung. "I'm not good for you," he continued, the words rushing out. "Everyone who gets close to me becomes a target. Tonight proved that. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering if today is the day someone tries to hurt me by hurting you." Amara touched his face gently. "Are you trying to protect me or push me away?" "Both." "Neither." "I don't know." Jae-sung closed his eyes. "All I know is that I can't lose you again. I won't survive it a second time." "Then don't lose me," Amara said simply. "Stop trying to make my choices for me.
Stop assuming you know what's best.
Just ask me what I want." "What do you want?" Amara took his hand and pressed it over her heart, the same way he had done when she was panicking during the fire. 7 knots, she whispered. Survival.
Hope.
Silence. Protection. Promise. Remembrance. Return. Jae-sung felt tears burning his eyes. "We survived. We found each other again. But we haven't completed the 7th knot," Amara said. "You promised to marry me when you were powerful enough to protect us. Well, you're the dragon of Gangnam now. Are you going to keep that promise? Or are you going to let fear win? If I marry you, you become part of this world. You become a target forever." "I've been a target since the day they threw me in that container," Amara replied. "The difference is, now I get to choose who stands beside me when the next attack comes." "And you choose me?" Jae-sung asked, his voice breaking. "Even knowing what I've become? Even knowing how many people I've hurt?" "I choose the boy who gave me half his rice when he was starving," Amara said. "I choose the man who knelt in front of his enemies to protect my dignity. I choose the person who has been trying so hard to remember how to be human." She took off the red string bracelet and held it between them. "This bracelet has 7 knots. We've completed 6 of them. I want to complete the 7th. Not because you owe me. Not because of some promise made by scared children. But because I love who you are and who you're trying to become." Jae-sung took the bracelet with shaking hands. Then he did something he had never done in his adult life. He knelt before her, there on the balcony, with the entire city of Seoul spread out below them. "Amara Johnson," he said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. "I am not a good man. I have done terrible things. I will probably do more terrible things before my life is over. But I promise you this. Every choice I make from now on, I will make as someone worthy of you. I will protect you. I will honor you. I will love you for every day I have left on this earth." He tied the red string bracelet back around her wrist, securing each of the 7 knots. "Will you marry me?" Amara pulled him to his feet and kissed him with 15 years of longing and loss and love finally released. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes to all of it." Jae-sung woke up to find Amara's side of the bed empty. For a moment, pure terror seized him. Had last night been a dream? Had she left? Had someone taken her while he slept? Then he heard her voice from the living room. No, Min-jae, I'm serious. Yes, I'm sure. Because I love him, that's why. Jae-sung walked out to find Amara on the phone, wearing one of his shirts, the red string bracelet visible on her wrist as she gestured while talking. She saw him and smiled. I have to go. I'll call you later. She hung up. Who was that? Jae-sung asked. My friend Min-jae. I was telling her I'm getting married. Amara's smile faded slightly. She thinks I'm insane. She knows who you are, what you do. She's worried. She's smart.
She is.
But she doesn't know the whole story. Amara crossed to him. Jae-sung, if we're going to do this, really do this, we need to be honest about what it means. I know what it means. You'll have security everywhere you go. You'll have to be careful about. That's not what I mean. Amara took his hands. I mean, what happens to the dragon of Gangnam? Does he disappear?
Does he evolve?
Because I won't marry a man who continues to build his empire on fear and violence. Jae-sung felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're asking me to give up everything I've built. I'm asking you to decide what kind of man you want to be. The empire will survive without you being a monster. You have legitimate businesses. You have resources. You could transition. It's not that simple, Jae-sung interrupted. If I show weakness now, every rival will attack. I'll lose everything, and worse, I'll put you in danger by appearing vulnerable. So, what's your plan? Continue running criminal operations while I pretend not to know? Become the wife who looks the other way. I don't know. Jae-sung pulled away, frustrated. I don't have all the answers. All I know is that I want to marry you, and I want to keep you alive. Everything else is negotiable. Amara was quiet for a long moment. I can't marry the dragon of Gangnam, she finally said. But I can marry Kim Jae-sung, the man who is trying to find a better way forward. What if they're the same person? Then you need to decide which one is stronger. Before Jae-sung could respond, his phone rang. The special ringtone that meant emergency. He answered. What? Boss. One of his lieutenants said urgently. Lee Dong-wook just made a move. He's claiming 3 of your territories and offering protection to anyone who defects from your organization. He's saying you've gone soft, that the dragon is dead. Jae-sung closed his eyes. I'll handle it.
How?
If we don't respond with force, we'll lose everything. I said I'll handle it. He hung up. Amara had heard enough. This is what I'm talking about. This cycle never ends. You respond with violence, he escalates, you escalate back, and it continues until someone dies. What choice do I have? Walk away. Jae-sung stared at her. Just walk away? From everything. You're the dragon of Gangnam because people fear you. But fear is exhausting to maintain. What if instead of fighting Lee, you just let him have it? Take your legitimate businesses, your resources, and build something new. Something that doesn't require you to be a monster. He'll see it as weakness. He'll come after us anyway. Maybe, Amara acknowledged. But at least we won't be feeding the cycle. At least you'll be choosing a different path. You're asking me to give up my power. I'm asking you to exchange one kind of power for another. Amara stepped closer. The power to choose. The power to change. The power to be the man you promised to become. Jae-sung looked at the woman he loved, wearing his shirt, wearing his bracelet, asking him to abandon the identity he had built for 15 years. If I do this, he said slowly, I can't protect you the way I do now. I won't have an army. I won't have the fear factor. You'll have me, Amara said. And I'll have you. That's all we had in the container, and we survived. This is insane. Yes, she agreed. But so is everything else we've been through. Jae-sung pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Okay, he whispered. Okay. The meeting with Lee Dong-wook took place on neutral ground, a traditional tea house in Insadong, surrounded by tourists and culture, where violence would be too conspicuous. Lee arrived with 6 bodyguards. Jae-sung arrived alone. Bold choice, Lee said as they sat across from each other. Or suicidal. Neither, Jae-sung replied calmly. I'm here to make you an offer. Lee raised an eyebrow.
I'm listening.
You can have my territories. All of them. The weapons routes, the protection rackets, the underground gambling. Take it with my blessing. The tea house went silent. Even the servers stopped mid-pour. Lee leaned forward. What's the catch?
No catch.
I'm retiring from the underworld. I'm keeping my legitimate businesses, the hotels, the real estate, the import companies. Everything criminal is yours. You're retiring. Lee said the word like it was foreign. The dragon of Gangnam is just flying away? Yes. Why would you do that? Jae-sung thought about Amara, waiting for him back at the penthouse. About the red string bracelet. About 7 knots and promises kept. Because I found something worth more than an empire, he said simply. Lee studied him for a long moment. You understand what this means. Every rival who is afraid to touch you will now see you as prey. You'll have no organization to protect you. I know. And you're willing to accept that risk for a woman. I'm willing to accept that risk for the chance to be something other than a monster. Lee sat back, genuinely surprised. I didn't think you had it in you. The capacity to walk away. Neither did I. What if I don't honor this agreement? Lee asked. What if I take your territories and then come after you anyway? Then you'll prove you're exactly what I'm trying not to be anymore, Jae-sung replied. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have been something more.
Lee was quiet for a long time.
I'll honor it, he finally said. Not because I respect you, but because I'm curious to see if you actually survive out there without your armor. If you do, he shrugged. Maybe there's hope for the rest of us. They shook hands, and just like that, the dragon of Gangnam ceased to exist. The next 6 months were the hardest of Jae-sung's life. Word spread quickly that he had retired. Some of his former lieutenants defected to Lee. Others scattered to different organizations. A few stayed loyal, transitioning to work in his legitimate businesses. His empire crumbled. His reputation faded. The fear that had protected him for 15 years evaporated like smoke. And Jae-sung discovered something terrifying. He was happy. He woke up next to Amara every morning without the weight of bodies on his conscience. He attended business meetings about hotels and real estate instead of weapon shipments. He learned to smile at strangers without calculating how to kill them. It was disorienting. It was uncomfortable. It was freedom. There were attacks, of course. Lee kept his word about the main territories, but smaller players saw Jae-sung as an easy target. His car was shot at twice. His office received threats. Someone tried to kidnap Amara from a market.
But they survived.
Sometimes by running. Sometimes by hiding. Sometimes by fighting. And slowly, the attacks decreased. The underworld moved on to other targets, other conflicts. Jae-sung became a ghost story, the dragon who gave up his fire and learned to walk among humans. The wedding was small. Just 12 people in a garden overlooking the Han River, with cherry blossoms falling like snow. Amara wore a simple white dress. Jae-sung wore a traditional hanbok, the first time he had worn one since he was a child in the orphanage. There was no priest, no official. Instead, they wrote their own vows. Amara went first. 15 years ago, a boy gave me a bracelet made of red string and told me about fate. He promised we would survive. We would protect each other. We would find our way back. She held up her wrist, where the original bracelet still remained, now joined by a new one that Jae-sung had made with steady, unbloodied hands. We kept 6 of those promises through hell and separation and choices that broke us both. Today, we keep the 7th. Not because fate demands it, but because we choose it. She turned to Jae-sung, tears streaming down her face. I choose you. Not the dragon. Not the empire. Just you, Kim Jae-sung, the boy who shared his rice, the man who learned to be human again. I choose you every day for the rest of our lives. Jae-sung had written his vows on paper, but when the moment came, he folded the paper and spoke from his heart. When I was 16, I thought power meant never being helpless again. So I spent 15 years building an empire that made me the most powerful man in Seoul. And I was miserable every single day. He took Amara's hands. You taught me that real power isn't control. It's vulnerability. It's choosing to love someone even when it terrifies you. It's tying a red string around someone's wrist and believing that fate will bring you back together. He touched each knot on the bracelet. Survival, we made it. Hope, we never lost it. Silence, we learned when to speak. Protection, we fought for each other. Promise, we're keeping it. Remembrance, we never forgot. And now, return, we're finally home. Jae-sung pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold wedding band. Nothing extravagant. Nothing ostentatious. This ring doesn't replace the bracelet, he said. Nothing ever will. But it's a new promise. That I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the woman who saved my life by refusing to let me forget I was human. He slid the ring onto her finger, beside the red string. I love you, Amara Johnson. Not because of fate, but because you're you. The officiant, a friend of Amara's from her mission days, smiled. Then by the power vested in me, and more importantly, by the promises you've made to each other, I declare you married. You may kiss. And there, under falling cherry blossoms, Kim Jae-sung kissed his wife and felt the final knot tie closed. The seventh promise, kept at last. The small restaurant in Hongdae was always crowded. It served simple food, kimchi jjigae, bibimbap, grilled mackerel, the kind of meals that reminded people of home. It was owned by a quiet couple who had moved to the neighborhood 3 years ago. The husband was tall, handsome in a reserved way, with scars on his hands that spoke of a hard past. The wife was warm and gracious, her laugh filling the small space with light. They lived in the apartment above the restaurant. They worked long hours. They knew all their regular customers by name. No one knew that the husband had once been the dragon of Gangnam. Jae-sung wiped down tables while Amara handled the register, their movements synchronized from years of working side by side. It was late evening, the dinner rush finally over. Long day, Amara said, stretching. Good day, Jae-sung corrected. He looked around the restaurant, at the warm lighting, the laughter of the last few customers, the simple joy of honest work. 3 years ago, he couldn't have imagined this life. Now, he couldn't imagine any other. A young couple entered just as they were about to close. They looked nervous, holding hands tightly. I'm sorry, the girl said in English with an American accent. Are you still serving? We've been walking around trying to find somewhere to eat, and everywhere is closed. Come in, Amara said warmly, also in English.
Seat.
I'll make you something. Jae-sung watched his wife guide the couple to a table, speaking softly to put them at ease. He saw himself and Amara in them, young, foreign, trying to find their place in a complicated world. As Amara disappeared into the kitchen, Jae-sung brought water to the couple's table. The girl noticed his hands, the scars, the rough calluses. You've worked hard, she said softly. All my life. But this is the first time the work has meant something. Later that night, after the couple had left with full stomachs and grateful smiles, Jae-sung and Amara climbed the stairs to their small apartment. It was nothing like the penthouse. Just 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom that barely fit both of them. But it was home. Amara was washing dishes when Jae-sung wrapped his arms around her from behind. Do you regret it? He asked softly. Giving up the luxury, the comfort, all of it. Amara dried her hands and turned to face him. On her wrist, she still wore both bracelets, the original red string, now faded and worn, and the newer one Jae-sung had made before their wedding. "You know what I miss from the penthouse?" she asked. "What?" "Absolutely nothing." She smiled. "That place was beautiful and empty. This place is small and full. Full of us. Full of meaning. Full of the life we're building together." She touched his face gently. "The dragon of Gangnam had everything money could buy. Kim Jae-sung has everything that matters." Jae-sung kissed her softly. "I love you. I love you too." They stood there in their tiny kitchen, holding each other, while the city of Seoul buzzed with life outside their window. Somewhere in the underworld, new dragons were rising, new empires being built on fear and violence. Lee Dong-wook still ruled with an iron fist. The cycle continued, endless and brutal. But up here, in a small apartment above a restaurant in Hongdae, two people who had survived hell together were building something that no empire could match. They were building a home. 6 months after that quiet evening, Amara placed a small box on the breakfast table. Jae-sung looked up from his coffee, curious. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a tiny bracelet, no bigger than his thumb, made of soft red string with 7 small knots. Jae-sung's breath caught. "Amara." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. The 7th knot was return. "But I think it's time we started thinking about the 8th knot. The one that comes after return." "The 8th knot," Jae-sung whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "Legacy," Amara said softly. "Something we build together. Something that proves broken things can be healed, and broken people can create something beautiful." Jae-sung pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world, because she was. "When?" he asked. 7 months. 7. He laughed through his tears. "The number that saved us." They stood there in the morning light, two survivors who had found their way back to each other across 15 years and an ocean of pain. The dragon of Gangnam was dead. But Kim Jae-sung was more alive than he had ever been. And the red string of fate, worn and faded but unbroken, would continue to tie them together through whatever came next.